introduction before, but I know it was meant in non-friendly terms, so thank you for that. Yeah, so my name's Akashamitra. There's a lot of you I don't know, so just to introduce myself. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about Vairocana today. So yeah, as Ratnaprabha said, my name Akashamitra, so I was partly sort of named after Vairocana. I'll say a little bit more about what that means in a moment, but the Akasha part of my name is to do with Vairocana. It's said that he dwells in Akasha, and I'll be saying a little bit more about what that means. And so when you're ordained into the Triratna Buddhist order, you take on what's called a sadhana practice, which means that you meditate on a particular Buddha figure every day. And I meditate on Vairocana. So I've been, in a way, sort of worshipping Vairocana, meditating on Vairocana every day since I was ordained 12 years ago. And I'll start off by saying I don't know who Vairocana is. I've been doing this practice for 12 years, and in some ways I feel there's an incredible bond between me and this figure, but he's very, very mysterious. They are very, very, very mysterious. But I'm going to try. I actually find it helpful giving a talk like this because it helps me to reflect on what the qualities of this Buddha are, and I'm going to try and share those with you and hopefully spark some interest in you. I want to start off by going all the way back to the Buddha and shortly after the Buddha's enlightenment. So I'm sure some of you will have heard this story before. So tomorrow you're celebrating Dharma Day. And at Dharma Day, what you're celebrating is the Buddha communicating his experience. So in becoming the Buddha, going from being Siddhartha Gautama to becoming the Buddha had undergone this revolution in consciousness. So for the first time, a human being had ascended to a new level of consciousness that was a radical departure from the ordinary human consciousness that we experience from day to day. So we can have glimpses of that consciousness. So how we talk about that is we talk about that as enlightenment. And if we didn't have glimpses of that, then we wouldn't be here. What we're trying to do is move from where we are to where the Buddha is. But the Buddha completely dwells in that new kind of completely radiant, completely beautiful, completely unobstructed consciousness. And soon after his enlightenment, he wanted to try and communicate that to other beings. It would be a very different story, wouldn't it, if the Buddha wasn't able to do that? None of us would be here for a start. There would be no Buddhism. There would have just have been this guy 2,500 years ago that had this experience that nobody else seemed to understand. So because he was able to do that, that's incredibly significant for us. Soon after the Buddha was enlightened, he found 5 of his old followers, and he began to converse with them. He began to speak with them, and soon, one after one, they also became enlightened. And there's a moment where the first disciple, I don't know what you'd call it, catches on, or I don't know, becomes enlightened. And the Buddha is absolutely joyful at this. The disciple's called Kondanya, and he says, Kondanya knows. Kondanya knows. I find that very, very moving, that for the first time, the Buddha knew that he'd been able to fully communicate his experience. And in doing that, another human being had been raised to the level that the Buddha was at. And one by one, the 5 friends and disciples ascended to the level of the Buddha. And soon after that, within a couple of months, there were 60 more enlightened beings in the world. And this is symbolized by, I'm going to hand this image around, just to say we've got an image of Vairocana on the shrine. So he's in his Japanese form. This is my rupa from my shrine at home. Here he's in his Japanese form, which is called Dainichi. For some reason, I don't know why, I love him in this form. I really respond to the kind of Japanese imagery. So he's on my shrine. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any of the images or symbols that I want to talk to you about today, even though he is actually the figure of Vairocana. But he's on the shrine nonetheless. But I also wanted to pass around this image of Vairocana, who does have more of the imagery that I'm going to talk about. And I'm also going to pass around these images as well. So you can just pass these out among yourselves. And you'll notice in the color image that I've passed around, he's holding a wheel. So he's holding an 8-spoked wheel. And this symbolizes what I've just talked about. So it symbolizes the communication of the Dharma. So we talk about that as enlightened communication. And what that means is, in one way, it means the formal teaching of the Buddha's teachings. But I think the meaning of it is much, much deeper than that. It's any time that we have a glimpse into something deeper than our ordinary human consciousness. And that can happen in all sorts of different ways, can't it? So it can happen through art, through beauty, through, I don't know, sometimes, it's something that happens to us and we somehow see it in a different way. And it's like any moment where our day-to-day ordinary human conscious seems to go to the background, and what seems to open up is something deeper and something more beautiful. So I was thinking about this, and I had an experience of this last weekend. So as I said, this can happen in ordinary, not ordinary, but in human communication, where I'm sure you must have all had experiences like this, where you're communicating with someone, and somehow in the communication, it seems to go beyond you and beyond them, and something else seems to open up. Often what I find is it's when you're prepared to take a risk in communication. So often our communication isn't really communication, is it? It's like we sort of have these things that we say, or we have these kind of platitudes. Do you know what I mean? It's like somebody mentions something, and I was chatting with someone about this the other day, and I was saying it's almost like we've got this filing cabinet, haven't we? Like I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about rock music, and we were talking about this band AC/DC, and we both kind of swapped our AC/DC stories. Like, I met the singer of AC/DC once, so he did this. You're not really communicating, are you? You're just getting your file out that says, this is what I say when this thing is mentioned. Or we kind of come out with these platitudes, or we say, oh, well, life's like that, isn't it? Or, do you know what I mean? Like, we're not actually communicating. Sometimes that's a sort of preliminary to communication, isn't it? But real communication happens where we venture into unknown territory. And I had an experience of this last weekend. I went for a walk with a friend in the morning, and we were walking down, I live near the London Buddhist Centre, and we were walking near there, just near Broadway Market. There's a canal along Broadway Market, and we were walking along there. And he was having quite a difficult time, and he was quite courageous in his communication. He was very, very honest about his experience in a way that I hadn't experienced him being before. And because he was very honest with me, I was able to ask him questions about what was actually going on for him. And before we knew it, it was like, I felt like we'd sort of stepped into a new dimension in our friendship. And we walked up Broadway Market, and we were getting a coffee, and there was this lovely place where they do these special kind of like artisan cinnamon buns and things like that. And we were in this cinnamon bun shop, and it was like, it just sort of became a bit magical. And then we took our coffees and we took our cinnamon buns, and we went and we sat down next to the canal. And again, he was quite honest about his experience. And what he described to me is that there's this way that he is being that he knows he has to put down. And he keeps doing it, and he just knows that he needs to let go, and he knows that he needs to reveal himself more, and he's not been able to do that up to now. But he was able to do that because I encouraged him, and he then knew that he could do that and it would be okay. He would be listened to. In a way, what we were talking about is secondary. What I'm trying to illustrate is that sometimes we can have an echo of that experience of the Buddha. I'm not enlightened, he's not enlightened, but somehow in our communication, there's something where we step up beyond our ordinary consciousness and beyond our ordinary human communication into something that is more beautiful, is more compassionate, is more enjoyable. and somehow it seems to release energy as well. All of these archetypal Buddha figures, you could think of them as manifestations of energy. You could, I mean, our teacher Sangharakshita talks about us as manifestations of energy, but most of the time, most of our energy is blocked, and it can become unblocked in communication. What happened in this particular moment was that he burst into tears. He was so moved by our communication that he burst into tears. I started crying as well soon after that because I really care about him. And we were both there in tears, and it was like there was this energy that was released, and it was out of the courage of our communication. We'd got to something new, and that was very, very moving for both of us. So, what do we need in order for that to happen? And I want to talk about the next symbol. So we've talked about the wheel and the Dharma chakra. And you might notice, do you notice anything about this shrine? Anything that strikes you about the shrine? It's white, yeah, exactly. I'm very struck, actually, that I've got the two of you sat here completely in white as well. You're wearing white. It's funny, isn't it? So when you look at the shrine, and then it's like your eye picks out the bits of white as well. There's lots of white in the room. And Vairocana himself is the color white. So you'll see that from the color image that I've been passing around. This is the color that's associated with him. So all of these archetypal Buddhas have a color associated with them. And the color associated with Vairocana is white. One of the ways that I ended up taking on this figure to meditate on and sort of becoming devoted to this figure of Vairocana is before my formal practice started with this figure. I don't know why this happened, but I started getting obsessed with the color white. I just started finding it very, very beautiful, and was very, very drawn to it, and started exploring it and looking into it in all sorts of different ways. So around about this time, I was studying for a master's in music composition, and I became very interested in the composer John Cage. Now, so some of you might have heard of John Cage, yeah? He was he was actually a Buddhist. There's all sorts of links and weird synchronicities here, but he was a Buddhist, and his teacher Daisetsu Suzuki used to read to him from this Buddhist sutra called the Avatamsaka Sutra, and I'm going to finish today with a reading from this sutra. His teacher used to read to him from this sutra, and Cage his most famous piece of work was called 4 minutes 33. So some of you will have heard of this, where it's a composition with no notes in it. It has 3 movements, and they are all completely silent. So the musician sits down at the piano or whatever it is, and they don't do anything for 4.5 minutes. Now it's funny, whenever you talk about this, people laugh, and there's something in it that makes us a bit nervous, I think. And he was very, very inspired by the artist Robert Rauschenberg. Cage had the idea for this piece 10 years before he actually had the courage to write it and put it out there. And part of what he was fearful because he felt that, what a radical thing to do, right? What a crazy thing to do. This is the 1950s, to publish a piece of music with no notes in it. But his friend Robert Rauschenberg produced a series of paintings called the White Paintings. And they're just this series. He actually did a series of black paintings as well, but the white paintings came first. And he produced this 3-panel series of completely white paintings. And that was such a bold step that gave Cage the courage to write 4 minutes and 33. And he then said it was the most important piece of music that he ever wrote. And he said it was the climax of his career. He carried on making music for the rest of his life, but he said that was the pinnacle of what he did. And I think there's something in that which is very much about the quality that I wanted to draw out, which is of receptivity. So I think you could say all sorts of things about the color white, but one of the things you could say is that it symbolizes receptivity. and we need receptivity if we're going to practice the Dharma, if we're going to practice Buddhism, if we're going to walk towards Vairocana, we need to have receptivity. And if we're going to communicate with each other, truly communicate with each other, we need receptivity. So round about this time when I was studying for a master's in music composition, this is what got me interested in John Cage. And this was back in the times when it was cheap to live in London. So I was living in this huge house in Zone 1, and it was cheap. I mean, God, you can't imagine that these days, can you? But it was so big that I had a whole studio for making music. And I decided that I was going to have this white room. And I painted the floorboards white, and I painted the walls white, and I painted the ceiling white, and I just had a white iMac there. So the room was completely white, and that's where I started sort of composing. And I made all of this music that I don't think I would ever have been able to make if I'd just been in an ordinary sort of studio environment. Yeah, that's something about me and receptivity and the color white. But I think when we do have that quality of receptivity, it's very hard to have that in our day-to-day life, isn't it? We're busy, we're bombarded with input all the time. This is the great sort of scourge of our age, isn't it? Is that we're on our phones all the time. There's advertising. There's, we're going from place to place. There's constant input. And the sort of the enemy of receptivity is being over-inputted, basically. The imagery that comes to my mind is I live in a community with two other, a small Buddhist community with two other guys. And my chief gripe with the two other people that I live with is that they never empty the recycling, right? So what they do is they always just try and, we can stuff that down a bit further, can't we? We can stuff another couple of cereal boxes in there. And I'm always saying to them, can you just not stuff it down any further? Can you just take it out, basically? Probably I don't do it as much as I should as well. But anyway, but we're a bit like that, aren't we? We sort of think that what we need to do is to know more and sort of understand more and read more. And if we read more, then we'll understand more. And if we understand more, then we'll become wiser. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of stuff more and more and more and more into ourselves like that. And actually, one way of looking at the Buddhist path is what we really need to do is just empty ourselves out more regularly, or just actually take in less in the first place. It's hard to do that in our day-to-day lives, but we can do that on retreat, and that's one of the reasons why we go on retreat. So we meditate to do that, but we also go on retreat to do that. And this thing that I was saying about when we're in that state of receptivity, it's like everything becomes a teaching then. This is what Vairocana represents. So this holding the wheel, it's basically saying, look, enlightenment is trying to communicate itself to you. All you need to do is become receptive. That's our job, is to become receptive. So partly we become receptive by studying, by training our mind in a certain direction, by understanding what reality actually is and what it isn't, trying to let go of our views that stand in the way of us being more receptive. But partly we're also trying to create space. I had a very strong experience of this a few years ago. I think it's about 5 or 6 years ago now, where I'd been on solitary retreat in Snowdonia I was there for a couple of weeks, and I think I'd been there about 10 days at this point. And I'd had this incredibly beautiful meditation. So I'm not someone who enjoys deep states of meditation easily. I've come to enjoy meditation. I've come to enjoy depth in meditation, but I'm not a sort of a natural meditator. So I enjoyed this experience all the more because it's not something that happens to me on a regular basis. Anyway, I went into this very, very, very deep state of consciousness in meditation, and I stayed there for ages. I think it was a couple of hours. Absolutely beautiful, like nothing I'd experienced up until that point. And when I came out of meditation, it was like the world just looked different. The world was exactly the same in one way. Nothing had been added, but what had been taken away was usually what stands in my way of seeing things as they actually are, which is the mind's chatter. It's almost like, I was seeing everything through a set of goggles or glasses or something, and it was like someone had basically cleaned the glass on them. And I was in this sort of wooden cabin, basically, and I stepped out of this cabin, and at that moment, 3 birds just flew across the sky. Just 3 birds, that's all it was, one after the other, like that. And I think it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life up to that point. I was incredibly moved by it. It was like they were perfect birds in a perfect sky. I don't know what to say other than that, really. And I'm sure that if that had happened on the first morning of my retreat, I'd have looked up and said, birds, yeah, but there was something about the state of mind that I was in. It was just a perfect moment, and it was like a teaching. It was like a teaching. I can't say what even it was a teaching of, but it was like a teaching. So when we have an experience like that, I'm sure you will have experienced things like that for yourself. You can get that through sometimes looking at works of art, or just being in nature, or as I said, communication, or however we experience that. It's like that's a quality of illumination, or it's like things become sort of lighter, like literally lighter. That was my experience. And this is what they say about Vairocana, is they call Vairocana the illuminator. And that's a wonderful image, isn't it? Because if you think about that, it's like when something's illuminated, it's not that the thing itself changes, it's that we see it differently. So one way of thinking about this is, in our normal experience, it's like if you can imagine a crowded room full of furniture, in our normal day-to-day way of going about things, because we're sort of in the dark or in low light, we're constantly bumping into furniture, and we're knocking things off the shelves, and we're stubbing our toes on the settee and that sort of thing. And actually, when that illumination comes in, it's not that anything changes in that way, it's that we see it differently. So things are illuminated, things are brought to life, and when things are illuminated, we see them as they are, which is beautiful and radiant. And this is the quality I was saying at the start that Vairocana dwells in. So he dwells in Akasha, which is the first part of my name. So Akasha means something like space. It also means sky. It's actually a boy's name in India, which means sky, which is very lovely. So when I go into Starbucks in India and I don't want to confuse them with my 5-syllable name, I just say, it's just Akash, don't worry. So the first part of my name is Akasha, and that it means sky or space, but it's a radiant space. So it also has this quality of radiance. So it also means to radiate or to shine. And that is what arises when our ordinary, sort of deluded, self-preoccupied consciousness, I don't know what you'd say, like either sort of falls away or is displaced, and something else arises. And as I said, that can happen sometimes, when we're in the presence of great works of art, or it can happen in communication. It also sometimes happens just with life events. And it's not always a pleasant experience. Or let me put it another way, it's not always related to pleasant experience. Sometimes you can just seem to sort of have an opening, and that can seem to happen. It happens to people. But it can also happen, it's almost a little bit like reality crashes in. So it's like we're living in a world which is a certain way, but we have fixed ideas about that world which are wrong. which means that we're not actually in touch with reality as it is. So the way we think things are is we're convinced that things should be stable and reliable and permanent, and we think that there should be some lasting satisfaction somewhere, but that is not to be had in ordinary human consciousness. So to the extent that we go about our lives with that expectation, we're going to be disappointed, but sometimes even those beliefs, that it's not even that they're sort of gently challenged. Sometimes something actually just crashes in, and it destroys that. Basically, it's like something happens where we can't fail but see that how we saw things was no longer the way it is. This happened to me really strongly when I was a young man. My father died when I was 24. He died quite suddenly. He had a very aggressive form of cancer, which was so aggressive that it wasn't diagnosed until through the post-mortem. Basically, he got ill, he went into hospital. We didn't know what was wrong with him, and within a few months he died. And at 24, I didn't expect my father to die. So he was younger than I am now when he died. He was 49 when he died. And that was a tremendous shock to me at the time. But weirdly, and this is a bit of a controversial thing to say, and I hope you'll understand where I'm coming from with this. I had a very loving relationship with my father. But when he died, the shock of that actually was quite liberating and quite beautiful for me at the same time. It launched me more seriously on a Buddhist path. I'd been practicing for some years at that point. I'd got involved when I was 21 or 22, I think, in Buddhism, but I was practicing in a very, very half-hearted way. My lifestyle was not really conducive to practicing Buddhism. And when my father died, it was like a tremendous shock, but it was a positive shock. It was a realization that actually what the Buddha was saying is true. You cannot take anything for granted. Things are not permanent. They're not stable. And none of us know how long we've got. So my sort of realization at that time was I need to do something with my life. So it was a tremendous shock, but it was a very, very positive shock. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and just see if anyone's got any questions or if anyone would like to ask anything before I sort of go on to the next bit and sort of towards the end and towards a conclusion. If you've got a question and it's not very well formed and it's sort of half formed, then that's completely fine. Or if we all want to just sit here in noble silence, that's also fine as well.
How did you decide what was living your life?
What was?
Living your life, or?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought about it consciously at the time, but what I did was I just threw my life completely up in the air. So at that point, the lifestyle thing was I was drinking a lot and taking a lot of drugs at the time, but I was working for a charity, and there were a worldwide federation of communities, basically this charity where you live and work with people with disabilities, and I decided to just go and work abroad and I went to live in Calcutta for a year, and I knew that if I did that, I would have to completely change my lifestyle. And I went to live. It was an ecumenical charity, so it was like a spiritual community that I went to live in India. I went and lived there. I'd never even been outside of. I think I'd been to the States on a school exchange, and I'd been to Amsterdam for a weekend. That gives you an idea of what my life was like at the time. And then I committed to going and living in Calcutta for a year, and that started a lifelong change for me. You know, I'm now working, and I'd spend a couple of months of the year in India every year, and that was the first time when I spent a year basically not drinking, not taking drugs, meditating every day, all of that sort of thing. So I think that wasn't conscious, but I think there was a subconscious part of me that was basically like, you need to change, you know. Yeah.
Akashamitra, there
Yeah.
is a comment /
Oh, yes.
question online.
Yeah, yeah.
So your story about the birds while on solitary
Yeah.
retreat, I find the experience equally magical, but being a bit of a nihilist, I probably struggle to find a reason to integrate the experience. What you seem to be saying is it points to a general nature of reality that
Yes.
really does change how we think and see the world.
Yes.
And she says it's kind of a question that comes from Jenny.
Okay, yeah. Well, you can say to Jenny that I'd like to have a longer chat with her about that, but yeah, that's right. I think how we interpret our experience is crucial, isn't it? For me, I probably lean more towards being a bit of a sort of eternalist. This is sort of like Buddhist jargon for some, you know, we all know what a nihilist is, don't you? People know what a nihilist is. And an eternalist is somebody who's much more like basically, like that. I don't know, that's the way I can put it. Ratnaprabha could probably put it much better. But it's, you know, somebody who tends towards the wrong view that there's a sort of an eternal soul, rather than the wrong view that there's nothing after death, basically. I'm not saying I believe that there's an eternal soul, but I would tend towards more of that scale. But how we interpret our experience is crucial, isn't it? For me, when I had that experience, it just spoke to me of it had the flavor of a higher dimension. It had the flavor of like a deeper reality or something like that. Maybe we need to train ourselves towards that. I don't know, but it seemed like that was it. That was part of the experience. If people have experiences like that, where it's somehow it's like you're not in your ordinary mind. It's like things just become more sort of luminous, or yeah.
You've been talking about the word receptive.
Yes.
All morning.
Yeah.
And you were obviously in this meditative state.
Yeah.
That probably made
Yeah.
you more receptive.
Yeah, absolutely, completely.
Seeing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to communicate, but you've done it better than I have, so thank you. Okay, so...
Yeah, I was just add to that, because I think it's like the moment of like transformation or something that you were talking about.
Yeah.
The birds were like, yeah, sort of an image of transformation or something.
That's right. Yeah. They were an image of something. I don't know what it was. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's like we can't always explain, you know, we can have an experience, we can't really say what it is in words, but it's like it stands for something, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start moving towards... You can't just walk up to Vairocana. This is the thing. He's the Buddha of ultimate reality. You have to kind of tiptoe around a little bit. What we've done is we've talked about the wheel. We've talked about the color white. Now we're going to start actually saying what would happen if you really actually wanted to move towards Vairocana. Well, there is something between you and them. So if we look at this image, do we know what that is? Lions, that's right. So there are two lions which hold up Vairocana's throne. And you can talk about this in different ways, all sorts of... It's an image, so it's multivalent, is that the word? It has many meanings. But the meaning that I want to focus on is one of courage. If you're really going to practice Buddhism, if you're actually going to change your life and practice these teachings in the direction of Vairocana, in the direction of enlightenment, in the direction of ultimate reality, well, that takes courage. And that's partly what these lines symbolize for me, is they guard Vairocana in a sense. There's also something about sovereignty and kind of, it's said that Vairocana's teaching is like the lion's roar, basically, because the lion is the supreme animal in the jungle. But I think it also speaks of courage. I was talking earlier about this communication that I had with a friend, and I think we were both a bit courageous in that communication. He revealed himself in a way that he hadn't previously revealed himself. That was in the context of a good friendship. But still, it takes courage to do that, doesn't it? And it takes courage to practice in the face of a culture that doesn't hold the values of wisdom and renunciation and generosity dear. That's not the culture that we live in. There are pockets of that in our culture, but the broad sweep of our culture is about, finding a place where you can be comfortable and staying there and accumulating as much to be comfortable as you can. And that's not what Vairocana represents. If you want to really approach him and really be in his presence, you have to be prepared to think differently and live in a different way. And I think this is what the lions represent, is that courage. There's a phrase, I think it's the poet Rilke, who said that life expands or contracts according to our courage. I think that's beautiful, isn't it? Our life expands or contracts according to our courage. So if you're not prepared to be courageous, your life will not expand. But if you are prepared to be courageous, then there's no end to what you or your mind or your consciousness can become. And in a way, ultimately, that's not about you. It's about you getting out of the way and you letting something come through you, which is the wisdom of Vairocana. I'll just share one final image with you. And that is, when I thought of this, the image that came to mind was, I saw this documentary called Human Planet about, 15 years ago. And there's this incredible section in it where these Maasai warriors do this thing where they basically go up to lions who've made a recent kill, and they go up and they steal some of their prey. You think, how on earth is that possible? These 3 Maasai warriors, if you go on YouTube, you just Google African tribe steals lion's meat, and it's there, right? These 3 guys, and they just literally face down these lions. They walk up to them, and the lions must think, hang on a minute, if these guys are prepared to just walk towards us, they must have something up their sleeve. So the lions run away, and the Maasai warrior guys go up and they hack off this massive bit of this bison that they've just killed, sling it over their shoulder, and then walk away before the lions catch on, basically, and they come back. Like, how much courage does that take? It's phenomenal, isn't it? And I think that's a beautiful image for the kind of courage we need to have if we are going to approach this kind of wisdom. And when we do that, if we can face down these lions, what we get to is ultimate reality. And I'm going to finish with a reading from this sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra. So I've sort of parallel with my relationship with Vairocana. Vairocana is central in this text. As you can see, it's not holiday reading. Don't take this one with you to Center Parks or whatever. It's definitely one for a solitary retreat. And even then, it's completely impenetrable. But I love reading things that are completely impenetrable. They somehow call you to where they are, rather than you thinking you can bring them to where you are. So in this sutra, there's a pilgrim called Sudana, and he goes to all of these different teachers. He actually goes to an infinite number of teachers, but in the sutra, it's about 35 or 40, but that stands for an infinite number of teachers. And eventually, he reaches the Buddha Maitreya, who lets him into this, I don't know what you'd call it, this thing called Vairocana's Tower of Adornments. And Vairocana's Tower of Adornments is a symbol for what ultimate reality is. It's incredibly beautiful, it's joyful, it's blissful, it's liberating, and it's infinite, because inside Vairocana's Tower of Adornments are other Vairocana's Tower of Adornments. And in each of those towers of Vairocana's adornments are other towers. So it's basically saying that the enlightenment experience is completely infinite and beautiful. So I'm just going to read a short section from this to finish. Then Sudana, in greatest wonder, went into the tower. As soon as he'd entered, the door shut. He saw the tower immensely vast and wide, hundreds of thousands of leagues wide, as measureless as the sky, as vast as all of space, adorned with countless attributes, countless canopies, banners, pennants, jewels, garlands of pearls and gems, moons and half-moons, multicolored streamers, jewel nets, gold nets, strings of jewels, jewels on golden threads, sweetly ringing bells of nets and chimes, flowers showering, celestial garments and streamers. It goes on and on and on like this, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But then it says, also inside the great tower, he saw hundreds of thousands of other towers similarly arrayed. He saw those towers as infinitely vast as space, evenly arrayed in all directions, yet these towers were not mixed up with one another, being each mutually distinct, while appearing reflected in each and every object of all the other towers. Sudana, seeing this miraculous manifestation of the inconceivable realm of the great tower containing the adornments of Vairocana, was flooded with joy and bliss. His mind was cleared of all conceptions and freed from all obstructions. Okay, thank you.